All right, welcome everybody to our CAD Basics workshop, where we will be working with Onshape. We are the Gator Theme Park Engineering and Design team, and my name is Peyton Marinelli.
That makes sense. I introduce myself too. My name is Brandon Lamb.
All right, let's get started. So the first question you may be asking yourself is, what exactly is CAD? And CAD is, well, the CDC defines CAD as a coronary artery disease, which is basically a condition where the blood vessels are narrowed. Oh, wait, that was yesterday's. Okay, let me fix that. Okay, yeah, that's better. Okay. CAD, in our case, stands for Computer Aided Design, which is essentially software used to aid in the creation, modification, analysis, or optimization of a design. CAD is used in a number of industries, quite a bit of them, like aerospace, architecture, automotive, civil engineering, animation, game design, dentistry even, fashion design, forensics, interior design, and much, much more. Before CAD, designs and calculations were done by hand on sheets of paper using non-electric tools like the slide rule, if you guys even know what that is. The picture on the top right is a drafting room at General Motors. And by now, there's a slight chance you may have an idea of why CAD is an upgrade to the previous design methods. But if not, I'll try to persuade you even more. CAD is easier to visualize. You could change the view of drawings in new ways that allows us to perceive objects from all angles. It's better quality. No longer does the quality of your designs rely on how shaky your hand was that day. It's more accurate. There are metrics you can look at and evaluate your design. It's robust. You can duplicate drawings without remaking the whole sketch. It saves time. Quick commands, redo, copy and paste all allow you to make designs faster than ever. And also simulations. You could simulate your drawings. Once your drawings are complete, you could, excuse me, you could put your designs in tests without having to manufacture and create the objects in real life. And these images down below on the left are, well, they're both CAD designs. On the left is a 3D design of a motorcycle engine, and on the right is a 2D AutoCAD layout of an auditorium, which are both different types of CAD. These are some popular CAD softwares, and a lot of these fit in a bunch of different categories. Some of the 3D software include Inventor and SolidWorks, which are both widely used within industries and are considered the top of the line for 3D modeling. There's software that specializes with 2D drafting, like AutoCAD, which is great for anything 2D, basically. There's software that is used for animations and digital models, like Blender or Autodesk 3ds Max. There's software for building information modeling, or BIM. If you went to the presentation yesterday, you may have saw a design that was all animated in the entire castle. That was done in a BIM software. One of the most popular of these softwares is Revit, which is used for making 3D models of buildings and structures. And there's also Civil 3D, which is used by civil engineers for projects that involve transportation, land development, and wastewater. There's also plenty others that you could choose. You could do just about anything you desire. We're recording, right? Yes. Okay.
Yeah.
Next slide. In this workshop, and in the ride design team, we will be using Onshape for a number of different reasons. It is similar to the most popular CAD softwares like SolidWorks, and skills can translate easily. it is run within the browser, so there's no need to ever download or install. It allows us to share files between one another and have some sort of version control, which is great for the design team. And most importantly, it's free for students. Nevertheless, there is always downsides to everything. And for Onshape, there are not a lot of packages and add-ons available. And it is focused on the design rather than analysis.
Yeah, and one thing I want to add is
Sure.
Onshape was actually created by one of the original founders of SolidWorks, which is why it's very, very similar in features and capabilities.
All right, and now jumping into the software itself. When first logging in, this is the screen you'll see. This is the file management page. In this screen, you can access all the drawings you created, drawings that you were shared with, and also drawings that were shared online by random people. In the top right, there is an app store where you can access add-ons like simulations and other utilities. A lot of them cost money, but there are a few of them for free, depending on what you need. Excuse me. There's also the Learning Center, where you can find yourself self-paced courses where you can expand upon your knowledge after today. And in the top left, there's a create button, which is used to create or import a new CAD file. And when clicking on to create, you could see a little menu like that. And now I'll hand it off to Brandon, where he'll go into the actual drawing interface and the rest of the presentation.
Awesome. Yeah, let me see if I can get this set up. Okay. All right, can you guys see from here all right?
Yes.
All right. So first things first is, like we said, make sure you have an account at some point, maybe while I'm doing this, just so we're going to get to actually creating some parts. So it'd be very helpful to have the software so you can follow along while I'm doing my thing as well. But yeah, so first off is when you create a part, you're going to start with kind of a 3D view. This specific like angle is called an isometric view. And the idea of kind of 3D modeling overall is you start by going 2D, making 2D drawings, and then kind of manipulating them into 3D. So this is kind of just an example of what you would be seeing. So for example, go to this next page. If you look at this thing straight on, which is the same part, it looks almost 2D, right? So what you would do is, let's say you want to make this 3D part, you would first create this drawing in 2 dimensions and doing an action called an extrude, right? So to give you an example, what we do is we would select that front plane. So remember, a plane is just kind of a very large expanse. The same plane as in like geometry. And then you look at it straight head on. You create, let's say, for instance, this drawing right here. When you're done with that and you confine and define this sketch, which I'll explain later, you then can just make it almost wider in 1 dimension, because obviously a 2D picture is almost infinitesimally thin, but then you can make it wider by using an action called extruding. So that's just kind of an example of how this kind of thing works. And obviously we'll get more into the actual things once we get into the actual software. So typing in the actual software. So is anyone not able to create an Onshape account yet, or unable to access it? Alrighty, sounds like no issue. So what we're going to be doing is we're going to be creating this part first here, which is not too bad. But with a lot of things, what you might want to do is sometimes start with a drawing. So like Ping was saying, even though we have CAD now, sometimes it's good to have an idea of what you want to make just drawn out first. You don't have to try to do everything from memory. This is just a drawing that was kind of taken from the internet. So we're going to be using that to kind of create an example. Yeah, Peyton?
And for these first few drawings, don't feel free to just watch. You don't have to do anything right away. We'll have some time later where you could work on your own design and drawing. But right now you could just watch what Brandon's doing and take it all in, so you don't get too overloaded.
Yeah, that's very true. If you want to just watch at first, that is totally okay. So let's go over to how to make an actual part in Onshape. So first thing we're going to do is once you've made an account and verified everything, you should have a screen that looks similar to this, except you probably won't have like parts and folders and stuff like that. This area is very similar to like your computer's files. You can create folders and then create documents inside them. So what we're gonna do is I would create a folder, right? I would call it maybe TPED 3D Workshop. That's what I called here. And you go into it, and then now you're inside of a folder. And then what you do is you're gonna create a document. So a document is kind of similar to like a Word document, except instead of making a report, you're making parts and assemblies. So just hit create a document there and call it something. So I'm gonna call it, oh, what's a fun name? What's a fun name? JPEG. Why not? But once you create it, it should bring you to that very familiar kind of 3D view that we had before. So first thing I want to say is this is the little on the bottom says Part Studio. So right now, if we were to make something, we'd be making a part. And then if you make multiple parts and you want to like kind of put them all together, that would be called an assembly. So an assembly is just a collection of parts. But first, gonna start with the part. So let me just show you kind of, so first things first is, like I said, there's these views here. You can click on anything to interact with them. And you notice everything of your part is also going to be on this left-hand side here in the what's called the feature tree. Once we add some more stuff, things will keep on popping up on the left, and that's kind of how we keep track of what we're doing. Further things is you can hold right-click of a mouse to kind of move the view around, right? I don't love it because it's kind of like unintuitive sometimes. So the easier thing is if you notice this cube on the right is tracking almost along while I move it. That's actually the main way I use to look at the view. So let's say I want to look directly on the front view. I hit front and then do a directly look at the front just like that. If I want to look at the top, boom, the top. If I look at the bottom, there you go. So that kind of makes sense. And then you can hit the corners so you kind of leave an isometric, like from the diagonal kind of view. And then you can also use the arrow keys, of course, to move it around. And then there's also this stuff here that lets you move stuff around. And then let's see. So that's kind of like the 3D manipulation of the camera. So let's do an example. Let's do something more simple first. So let's try to make just a box, right? So if you want to think about a 3D box, a box is kind of just a rectangle that gets wider, right? So let's start with making a rectangle. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to align myself with the top plane, hitting up here, and then I'm going to select the top plane. So this is kind of like the canvas that I want to draw my drawing on. So what you want to do is the way you get to drawing mode, the 2D mode, is you hit sketch. And then now we are in sketch mode. And now we can still move the camera around, but you notice it says sketch 1. So that's kind of like saying like, okay, this is the plane that we want to draw on, that top plane. So what we can do now is if you look at the top here, these are starting from this one here, are kind of all of our drawing tools that we can use to create our drawings. So for instance, the first one is a line here. So that's kind of what it sounds like. You can just make a line of a specified length. And of course, a rectangle is 4 lines. So what we could do is so this is the origin here. We could start by just creating 4 lines, and that would make a rectangle. And you know, it's kind of like smart in a line. You notice that I don't even know if you can also make it accidentally crooked. So it's not a very good rectangle, but what you can do is if you want to define it. So these are just kind of all random lengths, right? You notice I can move it around. This button here, dimension, it also has a short key of, so it has a short key of D. Dimensioning means you kind of assign a length or kind of like a parameter to your drawing, right? So like this line right here, it's kind of an arbitrary length right now, but if I click it while I have the dimension tool and I click again, it's going to give me like a little text box. So let's say I want to make it 5 inches long, boom, now it's 5 inches, right? And if I try to move this, it's not going to let me because it's now like fixed at 5 inches. Okay, now let's say I want to define this one here. Let's say 2.5 inches, right? There you go. And then, so these two things can't move anymore. And then they also happen to have a relation. So relations is kind of relate different things in a sketch that forces them to be perpendicular. That's just kind of how we place in the beginning. This one is still moving around, so we still also have to define that. So what we can do is call this one also 2.5. And then if you notice before, when I didn't have this dimension, it was blue here. So blue basically means that's not constrained. It's not fixed. It can be anything, but when something's black, it means it is fixed and can't be moved or altered. And so generally when you're making drawings, you want everything to be constrained because that's how you know like everything is as solid and exactly what you imagine. So notice now our sketch here is fully black, which means it's called fully constrained, also known as fully defined. So now this sketch represents this rectangle inside here. So now if we wanted to now make an actual like cube or rectangular prism, I should say, there's two options. The quickest route, well, normal route would be say like, okay, that's the sketch I want. It takes you back to 3D. Now, this first one here, extrude. So extruding kind of means you take an image and just like rise it up almost. So you hit extrude. It's going to ask you which face and sketch regions to extrude. Well, we want to extrude that sketch one. So we click on that. And then notice it gives a little preview. So we can like kind of pull this arrow if we want to just like randomly pull it up. Or probably the better way is you give a specific depth value. So 2 inches, which means that would make that 2 inches high. So this would be a 5 by 2.5 by 2 inch rectangular prism. With extruding, you have a few different options. So blind means it kind of doesn't care about anything in the way. This will make more sense when we have other stuff rather than just the cube. But you can also, by the way, change the direction. So this arrow lets you flip the direction of it. Symmetric means it goes both ways. So like starting from there, it goes like one that way and one down. And then extruding actually has 2 specific parts. There's like adding and there's also removing. So let's say I have my cube here, right? And then I want to actually cut a little chunk of it out. Well, what we do is first select where we want to cut out. So let's say we want to cut out from this side, right? What you can do is you notice that it's not exactly on the front plane. Any new like faces on your part can also be drawn on, which kind of makes sense. You want to think about it in physical. You could draw on this if it was an actual rectangular prism. So let's say we want to cut kind of a little piece from the side here. We would hit, maybe align ourselves like this, hit sketch, and then we're going to make a new rectangle, right? So instead of doing those lines, there's also creating a rectangle feature as well right here. So I'm going to hit that. And then if you notice it says corner rectangle, that means you just define the 2 opposite corners and that will define the rectangle. So we'll start, how about in this corner, and it can go out, let's say about like this. And then you can also, oops. And so now let's do some quick random dimensions to say 2 by 1, why not? And you notice we only had to dimension 2 things because for a rectangle, you only need those 2 dimensions. And then since it knows it's a rectangle, it knows to automatically make these perpendicular. So it just kind of ends up working out like that. So we're going to say done with that. And we're going to now cut that little shoulder out, right? So we're going to hit extrude again, hit that sketch 2. But now, so you see it kind of wants to add something. Well, we don't want to add something, we want to remove, right? So we can hit remove. And you notice now it wants to cut a chunk of this off. So let's say if I want to just cut an inch off, I could just do 1 inch, right? But there's another thing here. There's some other options. So for instance, through all means it'll just cut everything in that dimension. So let's say you want to cut this entire thing off. That's easier than trying to figure out how wide this thing is. And there's also another good one is up to face. So we want to cut up to this face. Obviously, this is the same. Since this is the entire thing, that's the thing that's cutting all the way through. But let's say this extended out, you only want to cut up to a certain part, you can also do that. So it's pretty robust. So that's just kind of an example, a really basic example of how this thing works. We're going to start getting into that actual part. And I'm going to try to take it slow to let me know if I'm going too fast or you need any help with anything. Please feel free to send it in the chat or just turn on your mic and be like, yo, what are you talking about? You're not making any sense. But yeah, so I'm going to start with deleting everything, and we're going to start from the top. So let's look here. So one nice thing is if you're making something, it's nice to think about what's the easiest way to make something, right? So I'm looking at this and you kind of just want to ignore all the curvy parts, right? I'm looking at that little base thing there and noticing that seems not that bad to make. It's kind of like a square with rounded edges, right? So I just kind of wrote on the right here how I would probably approach making this. So I probably make that bottom base first, and then add that vertical cylindrical column, make the holes, and then apply fillets. So fillets are just curves, basically. Notice a square would normally have, let's say, like a pointed corner. Fillets just allow you to turn corners into smooth curves, and it's actually really easy to do in Onshape. And so that's why I like to save it for the end, because it's kind of, it can mess things up if you have the fillets first in terms of like trying to dimension the corner stuff, because if you fillet everything, you won't have those corners to dimension off of. So sometimes it's easier to do all those at the end, especially since it's more of a cosmetic feature. But yeah, so let's get into it. So let's look at this base. How do we want to make it? So this is kind of this is the isometric view of what it actually is. And then these are what's called orthographic views that look at from certain directions, like that front and top on that cube we saw before. So the one directly left of it is a top view, looking at it from the top down. And then the one on the bottom is a side view, looking at it from a side. It's symmetrical, so it doesn't really matter which side. So let's figure out, let's figure out how big the base is. If you notice, this arrow here spans from this top line to the bottom line, and that's saying 10, right? So that means that this dimension, just like the dimension we did before, was 10 inches. And you notice on the top here, side to side, it's also 10 inches. So this is simply just a 10 by 10 square. And then you look at the side view, you notice that it is from the bottom to the top of the base is 3. So that's saying 3. So it's basically a 10 by 10 by 3 rectangular prism, which is not that hard to make. We kind of made a very similar one before. So we're going to start doing that now. So just thinking about this, the easiest way would be kind of looking at that top view, right? So you could make it from the front. I mean, the names of these planes are just kind of arbitrary, but it's just best to be consistent with what makes sense. And to me, starting from that top makes sense. So we're going to go to that top. So remember, select that plane. You can also align your camera with it just to make things a little bit easier. And we're going to hit sketch. Now, remember, we're making a rectangle right now, or a square. So that's going to be easier. So notice, remember before we did what's called a corner rectangle before, where we defined a corner to corner. If you notice later on, we're going to have to make circles, and we kind of want that circle to be in the middle. So it'd be nice if our little origin was in the middle of the rectangle, if that makes sense, for kind of like future proofing. So an option we have, oh, I got to select the plane again. An option we have is if you hit this little arrow next to the corner rectangle, you have actually multiple options to make rectangles. So what we want to select right now is center point rectangle. So all you do for that is select where you want the center of the rectangle to be, which would be our origin, and then just kind of arbitrarily place a diagonal out, and it makes a rectangle with its center on the origin, which is nice because later on we're going to have to use that origin to make other circles. So now it's just kind of just giving you a view of like how that center is. Okay, so now let's define those edges, right? So let's start with that one over here. So remember, we're going to hit dimension up here. You can also use, there's a bunch of hotkeys. So if you hit like D, for instance, it'll just automatically select that dimension tool. But have that dimension tool selected. Click on this left edge. Click again. And then we're going to say 10. 10 inches. So obviously, so it made it a little bit bigger because we start off on a smaller scale. You can just use the mouse wheel to zoom out, by the way. We do the same thing for this edge here. 10, and then boom, everything is black because now it's perfectly defined because you only need those 2 dimensions to define a rectangle. So great, we have our sketch. So before, what I did was I hit OK to close the sketch, then I went to the 3D view and then extruded. Nice thing about Onshape is it actually knows that extruding is probably the most common thing you'll do with 3D designing. So it actually just has a little shortcut to just extrude now and skip going to that 3D. It'll just directly bring you to 3D and also do the thing. So Now we're going to extrude it. We know that we need 3 inches. And so that's approximately what it's going to be. So one thing as well. So remember how I said before, we're going to use that origin to kind of define the center of the cylinder. If you notice here, we're extruding up right now, which kind of blocks that origin. Now it's like on the bottom of the rectangle. So it's going to make more sense to flip that direction so that our origin stays that point. The origin's a nice reference point because we can just keep on making sketches that involve it. So we're going to actually flip the extrusion down. Remember, that's that black arrow right here, so that we kind of keep that open for us to use later. So once we get that, make sure it's going to be new. So that's creating something new. Hit OK, and boom, there we go. So we got our little rectangle now. Not too bad. Next thing we're going to do is we're going to make this little cylindrical column. What I want you to do is just ignore that holes. Remember, we're going to add the holes later. So we're just going to make just the whole thing. That's a pun. And then we're going to add the holes later. So we're going to look at what is that dimension of that hole. So if you look at the top view, you might see like, oh, 2. But that's actually kind of a little misleading because so by the way, there's a few, I put some other annotations. This symbol here, the little circle with a slash through it, is saying the diameter of something. So that's saying this symbol with a 2, that's saying that's a diameter of 2, versus over here, this is saying R2, where R is saying the radius. Now, does anyone have an idea why this thing, which is the hole, is using a diameter, and then the fillet, the little corner here, is using a radius? Anyone have any idea why it might be doing that?
Yeah, because there isn't a complete circle on the corners.
That's exactly it. So we generally use diameters when it's a full circle, and then we use radius when it's not a full circle, because we're kind of referencing from the center of the arc. So the center of the arc would be the middle of this, and then saying this radius too. It's just kind of a quirk. Obviously, you know that diameter is twice the radius, so it's not like it's really any different information. It's just kind of the way drawings are made. So here we notice it says a diameter of 2, but it's actually pointing to the hole in the center here, which is a little misleading. We actually need to look at the side view, and it's saying a diameter of 4. So that's saying that this cylinder is a diameter of 4 with a diameter 2 hole in the middle. So 4 is the dimension that we actually need. So what we're going to do is we're going to go back, and we're going to make that cylinder starting from the top. So I can hit either. You notice that it doesn't want me to, it wants me to select the top. It's the same, effectively the same as the top plane, but you can also select the top plane from here as well if you want to sketch on it. So we're going to sketch, we're going to look at it from the top again, and we're going to make the cylinder. So a cylinder is just an extruded circle. So we're going to make a circle. Same thing as with the rectangle, there's multiple options to make a circle, also an ellipse. The easiest thing is just going to be a center point circle. So you just define the center, and then you just click somewhere random outside. You can also from here so we know it needs to be 4. So if actually from here, before you click off, if you just type 4 and hit enter, it'll just automatically dimension it. If you don't want to do that, you can just go to the dimension tool. It just might save you some time to just kind of immediately establish it as the correct size. And then I kind of forgot how much we have to go up. So if you look here, okay, so if you look here, the bottom of the base of the top cylinder is 6. That means we just need to extrude this up 6. So we're going to hit that extrusion here. You can also use the shortcut Shift E. I'm going to use that. And then we need to go 6 up. Boom, just like that. And then you want to make sure it's the right direction. So obviously, if this would be the wrong direction, just flip it, make sure in the correct direction. We're adding. All looks good. Okay, there we go. So now we have just kind of like the base structure. We just need to add the holes and the fillets. So what I'm going to do is, so there's like always ways you can kind of save time. One thing I would think about is if this center hole goes all the way through, what I would maybe consider is creating a sketch that starts from the top of the cylinder here, and then making holes in all 5 holes, and then just cutting all the way through. And that would actually save me time because I only have to make one sketch of the 5 holes rather than sketches in two different locations. The other thing is, if you notice, for this sketch, it's actually not saying the center hole goes all the way through. It goes to just where the base is. And the way you can tell is in this side view here, a dash line means a hidden line. So it just means an edge that you can't actually see based on how, so like this, if you're looking from the side, you won't be able to see the hole, but you know, like the edges of the hole exist. So that's what the dash line is. And the dash lines stop at the base here. They don't keep on going all the way through. That means that this hole only goes to the top of the base, which means we can't actually make all 5 holes because they don't go all the way through. Our hole needs to stop at the base. So we're making just this top hole on the top of the cylinder right now. So we're going to go to the top. All right, so I already selected sketch. So I made my sketch the top of the cylinder. We're going to be making just another hole. So if you remember, this hole needs to be 2. So we're going to select center point circle. Our center point is the origin. Click out. We know it needs to be 2. So I'm going to hit 2, enter, boom. We have a defined circle. And you see, so I made that circle on the top part of the cylinder here. I'm going to go to extrude. And then you can either select the sketch from here or just physically select it on like the thing that you want to extrude on here, which would be that circle there. Notice this is not a hole. This is trying to make it longer. This is trying to make like a little extra part. That's not what we want. We need to remove. So we're gonna hit remove, just like that. Now, we want to go to this base, right? So a few different ways. Like I said, we know that this thing is 6 inches. So we can hit 6 inches and that's going to just kind of gives you a little shadow. It's going to make that correct depth. A little more fun way is what I would personally do is I would do up to face. So that's the kind of thing I mentioned before. We know we want to go only up to this cut. So we can just hit up to this face and it'll automatically just cut to just that face. So either way works. It's going to be the same exact result, but I think this one's a little more intuitive. Generally, the less math you have to do when you're designing stuff, the better. Just kind of let the computer do it for you because the computer can't really make any mistakes. So we have our hole there that goes to the base. And then now we need to make the other 4 holes around the edge. So what we're going to do is align myself to the top again, but now instead of me selecting the top of the cylinder, I'm going to be selecting the base because that's where we're cutting. So we're going to align ourselves again, hit sketch, and then we're going to make some of the circles. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to make just 1 circle for now. What you could do is just place all 4 of the circles and then all dimension them, but I'm going to show you kind of a quick tip that will save you some time. So let me look at the dimension. So you notice here, it's saying there are 4 holes. Each of them are 2 inches in diameter. So, okay, so I missed the thing where I can do the quick dimensioning thing. So I'm just going to use the dimension tool and call it 2 inches. Also, it doesn't matter where you place a dimension, just a place that's easy to access. So now let's figure out where it needs to be positioned. You'll notice that it's going, the center of the circle to the edge here is saying 2. And then it doesn't kind of explicitly say it, I suppose, but I would assume that's 2 from every edge. So also 2 from the bottom edge.
The top
Oh,
left.
actually, top left. Yeah, that's true. Yeah, so you would assume they're all equal, just equidistant. So 2 from each edge. So I'm going to, the way you do that is you select the center of the circle, and then, so I have the dimension tool, by the way, and then the edge, and you see it does a very similar thing in the drawing, right? So, that's 2 inches. So that gets that little vertical, and then we're going to do this from the side edge. Let me see if I can move. There we go. That's also 2 inches. So we have our now appropriate dimensions. You notice that the circle is fully black and the center of it is black as well. So if the center is blue like before, that means it could have moved around. So let me just delete that real quick. Notice it's still constrained by this 2, but it still should be able to move side. Okay. Excuse me. Oh, I have the dimension tool. Turn off the dimension tool. I can still slide it left and right because it's still 2 inches from the top. And that's not good because we want it to be a specific place. Boom, boom, 2. It's in its correct place now. Okay, so the problem is that's just 1 circle, right? We need the other couple. So what you could do is do that same thing 3 more times. Something that might save you more time is there's a feature called linear pattern. So that just basically you take something and then you copy it in kind of a certain line. So let me just hit that. There's also circular pattern if you want to go in a circle as well. But linear pattern, I hit it and you see that it creates a bunch of copies in this direction. Well, actually, it's too many in this direction. It creates 3. So what you can do is you would hit here. It's saying 3 times. We need just 2 of them in that direction. So double click that, hit 2. Boom. We have 2 of them. In this case, you might actually want to do math. So here it's saying how far away should they be. This one, you might want to actually do some math. It'll save you some more time in the long run. If this is 10 wide, 2 from the left here, 2 from the right here, 10 minus 2 is 6, which means these circles are 6 apart. So this dimension is 6 right here. And then that gets us that horizontal one. Oops. Okay, it clicked me out of the linear pattern, which I did not want. Can I still edit the linear pattern? Oh no. I think there. Oh gosh. It clicked me out of the linear pattern and I still want to edit it. Okay, I'm going to hit Control Z because I finished the linear pattern earlier than I wanted to. So go back, draw it out, hit 2 there, 6 there, and then that's good for the horizontal direction, but I actually still also want the vertical direction. So what I'm going to do is if I drag this arrow, it creates a copy in this direction. It's in the wrong direction, so actually I'm going to draw the arrow over here. And notice it creates now a separate one for this vertical distance. It's still going to be 6 as well because, oops, okay. It put in the right, I'm going to hit -6. That's put in the correct direction. It's going to display as 6, but -6 because it's going down versus up. Everything else looks right. If I wanted more in that direction, I would hit like 5, right? But there's no reason. We just want that too. So what that just did was it just created a copy basically of the circles we needed. And then hit OK, and then notice that is the sketch we want. We want those circles. Hit that sketch. We're going to hit Extrude, Remove, because we're cutting holes, and then see it's not cutting all the way through because we only have 1 inch. I'm going to hit Through All, which is going to cut it all the way through, and boom, we have kind of almost like a Lego brick looking kind of thing. The final thing is we're going to add those little fillets that we saw before. So over here, we're going to start with the ones on the corners. That's saying R2, so that's 2-inch radius fillets. And then fillet is going to be this one right here. So that's also Shift F. And then we want that radius to be 2, so 2 there. And then we're just going to click the things that we want to fillet. And then it's pretty smart, it's pretty cool. It'll just do it live for you. So select all those 4 edges. And then that looks like what we want it. You can also change the type, but don't worry about it circular. It's going to be pretty much you're doing all the time. Hit OK. Boom. We have those edge fillets that we wanted. The last thing is this the intersection between the base and the cylinder. That's also actually just a fillet. This one is actually adding material to make it smooth. This one was removing material to make it smooth, but it's still the same idea. Here it's saying radius of 1. It's pointing to that fillet. So same exact process. Hit fillet, 1 inch, hit that edge. That's exactly what we want. Hit OK, and boom, there we go. That is our part that we wanted to make from the beginning. So that's not bad. This one is not too bad, hopefully. I don't know if anyone's actually making it as well, but hopefully you got to the same stage as I did. But that just showed you a few of the basics. Obviously, there's a lot more stuff that we didn't use because this part wasn't too complicated. But you can just search up what any of these do. Revolve basically is, if you've ever taken a Calc 1, I suppose, like what was it called, the washer method? It's very similar to the washer method. So you kind of create a line as like the function, and then just revolve something around it. Other stuff. I would just highly encourage. Onshape has some nice tutorials as well that kind of explain what everything does. You can also just search up what all these are all like very standard terms in terms of 3D design. So you can just search up like, what is a rib in CAD? What is shelling? What is drafting? And it'll give you some nice explanations of it all. All right, so that was the first part. We'll move on to the next one, which is, I would say, a good amount more complicated. It involves a lot more curves and stuff, and a little more deciphering of the drawing. So I'm gonna let anyone catch up. I don't know if anyone wants to take a picture. Maybe it's easier if you want to take a picture of it so you can like reference it. I'm also gonna be going back and forth with it.
I could send a picture too.
Okay, sounds good. Sounds good. We're gonna be going on to this next one here. So let's look about it and let's think about it. You can see there's a lot more dimensions, a lot more curves, and you got to kind of understand a little bit more. So that on the top right is the 3D view. Directly left of it is a top view, and then directly below it is kind of a front view. You notice they kind of look, I don't know about you, but looking at the orthographic views, they kind of look different. Like you would think like, is this actually the same part? It's just like the way things line up. It's just gotta kind of imagine taking the actual model and like tilting it and like, okay, I see why it looks like that. Obviously like here, remember like this thing is circular on the right, but when you look at the side view, this looks like a rectangle. Well, it's because when you look at a circle from the side, it's assuming you can't see depth, it is the same as a rectangle. So it's a little tricky and just kind of got to figure it out. Here, what I would think is this, where you want to think about where you want to start off. I'm looking at this base here, and even though it's a more complicated shape than the one from before, it's usually easier to start off with the base. Obviously, it's not rectangular, it's got some curves, but it's not too bad because the top view kind of defines what that should be. So let's think about it. What I would just kind of do is just kind of make this outline, like kind of the outside perimeter of this, and just extrude it, because that's basically what it is. So just kind of ignore all the stuff on the inside. You can see it's going to go 48 inches this way. It's going to do a radius of 25 curve. It's going to go a certain amount. It's going to do a radius of 65 curve, and then it's going to do this little half circle that's radius 37.5 and complete it off. So we're going to try to do all that. Notice where it's dimensioning. So all these dimensions are coming from specific places. So like here, notice that all these lengths are coming from the center of the circle. So it might be helpful to use that as a starting place. And then also all these height dimensions are coming from this top edge right here. So it's going to be the easiest thing to do is create your drawing or whatever you're doing to match with whatever reference you have. So that way you don't have to do a bunch of math yourself. So what I would do is I'm thinking, okay, it kind of wants me to start from the circle, and I see I'm going to start with this half. That's not really a half circle, actually. It's kind of weird. Let's think about this. Maybe it'd be best to start from this corner here. Let's start from this corner, I suppose. Let's make a new part, first of all. You can hit here, insert new element. We're going to create a new part. So create a new part studio. This is kind of a base. Looking down at it, so I would start on that top like we did before. And let's think. Okay. What do you think? Should this be the center? I'm kind of now thinking that this maybe should be the center of the circle. Let's do that. That might be easier. Okay, so I'm going to be assuming that the origin is going to be the center of this circle, and then, but we're still going to start from there. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to create a point that is the correct kind of distance away. So if that's so hit top, create a sketch. If that's the center of that circle, that one's going to be like to the left and a little bit up. So I'm going to select point right here and place it arbitrarily kind of in that general vicinity. And then I'm going to put it the correct dimensions away. So it's 100 away, 100 inches away. That's pretty big. I'm going to have to zoom out for sure. Actually, you know what? What we can do is, since it doesn't give us any, what should I say, units, I'm going to assume it's talking about millimeters because that makes a lot more sense. So what you can change that is hitting this thing right here. Go to document properties. Never mind, not document properties. Workspace units. I'm going to change it to millimeters. Sweet. We're going to re-edit this. So we're going to change that to 100, and it'll automatically know I'm talking about millimeters. I could have also typed 100 mm, and I would have also known millimeters, but you don't want to do that for every single thing. All right, how high up does it go? We see that this rectangle is 16 wide. It certainly looks like that point is halfway in between, so we know that's going to be about 8 away. So we're going to say this and this. So notice if I bring my dimension here, it's going to be redimensioning the same thing. If I kind of bring it to the side in between, it's smart, and it knows I want to do this vertical dimension. So that's 8. Cool. So actually, I'm going to still edit this specific sketch. But now we have our point that is the corner of our base here. So what we're going to do now is just kind of we're going to follow along down this edge here. So first thing I'm seeing is 48. So this is 48 long here. We're going to make a line that stretches from here down to here. Oh, and then I'm going to type in 48, and it's smart enough to know to make it 48 for me. I'm trying to drag, there we go. I'm trying to drag this to the side. It's a little easier to read everything. All right. Next thing I'm seeing is this radius of 25. So there's two things we can do. We can make it a corner, and so we can either add an arc. So just kind of showing you. So here is an arc. So arcs are just like sections of circles. So you can kind of like arbitrarily place it like this, and then we could try to edit it. The easier thing is going to be just make it a corner and then use a sketch fillet to turn it into an arc. That'd be the easier thing, but I'm going to show how to do the arc just because it's good to just show more things. We kind of seen how fillet works, even though it's 3D fillet. So the way to make an arc is you need to know the center of the arc. So if you imagine this circle, if you extend it to a circle, it had the same center as this circle here, which means we need to know the center of this circle here. We can see it's 48 inches height-wise, and then it's 75 inches away from our origin. So if we want to place another circle about there, we know that that is 75 in this direction, and then it's also 48. So I could dimension this and this, make it 48. I'm going to show you relations. So relations just relate two separate things in a sketch. So we know that if this is 48 and this is 48, they should be aligned with each other kind of horizontally, or vertically, I should say. So what you can do is there are relations. I know for sure there are relations because I've seen them. Let me try to, they're right here. Okay, so for instance, this point and this point should be horizontal with one another. They should be like that. So what we're going to do is we're going to go to this, select horizontal, select our 2 points, and boom, it locks it in so that now they're horizontal to each other, and now you can't move it. So that would be the same effect as if I made that dimension 48, but this is kind of a little fancy way to do it and just showing off relations. Now we're going to select arcs. We're going to pick center point arc because now we do know our center point. And we're going to hit here. So first select our center, select where we know the arc's going to start, which is there. And then it's going to go like around here. We can see, we know it's exactly going to be a quarter and it's going to be vertically aligned from the drawing. So we're going to hit that. Otherwise, you just have to dimension it. You could actually, let me go like, can I edit this after? I can delete this relation. So let's say it went a little too far. You can also dimension the arc itself. So we know that's 25. So that's actually already. So you want to go like, I want to go here, here, here. No, okay. How do you? All right, this is where I don't normally do this. Here to here, maybe. There we. Give me a second. Trying to figure out how you would define in degrees. All right, never mind. Whatever. Forget it. There's probably a way to do it. I'm gonna make this vertical with that and that. There we go. So that's kind of intended what we want to do. Now it's going to go an unspecified distance. That is great. We don't know what that distance is because it's not defined. What we do know is an arc starts here, 27.5 away. So this plus means it's the center of this arc here. And it looks like it goes another quarter as well. So we're going to build this arc here, actually. So we're going to skip this rectangular part for now. Okay. I can see the center of this is 27.5 away. So we're going to place a point aligned with the origin. Make that 27.5. And then we're going to make that same arc that we did before, same method. So center. Now the arc wants to start this there-ish, and it wants to end horizontally. Now, notice that it's kind of an arbitrary radius right now. We know that's supposed to be 65, so we can just go ahead, click on that to dimension it, 65. And now we do have starting and ending points for this thing here. So now we just grab a line, connect them, and there we go. That's how we get around that. So it ended up being 47.5. We could have done the math. 70 minus 27.5 is probably that, whatever. I already figured out the number. But what's the point? You know, if you can figure out an easy way to not do math, might as well. Now we're moving on to the next part. That's going to be this right here. That's gonna be a little complicated because you notice where it intersects is not actually kind of defined. So what we're gonna do is we're gonna use what's called a trim. So we're gonna make just the circle in general, and then we're gonna cut away the parts that we don't need. So we know that's gonna be a circle. Boom. And then we know it's gonna go connect out here. And then we could dimension it, but since it knows that it needs to connect with here, it knows it's automatically 75, just because the way the geometry works. Now, what we're going to do is this little rectangle part, we're going to just like kind of cut into it. So we're just going to draw this arbitrarily so that at least it's longer than the circle. So I'll show you what I mean. It's probably hard to explain in words, but physically doing it, just making a line, and it's going past there. So you see that it is intersecting at a point. We just don't know that point, but it's not important because we have the outline that we need. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go to this thing here called trim. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to click away the parts that I don't need. So I don't need the extra part of this that goes past this. Boom. I don't need the bottom part of the circle. Boom. And there we go. That's the outline that we wanted. That's that perimeter of the base. So there we go. That took probably more work than expected. Took longer than I expected a little bit, but we got to what we needed. So that's the profile of that base we wanted. We're gonna hit extrude. And then we can see that the little base here is 16. We're gonna do that same thing I said before. It's probably easier to extrude it down so that way you have the top space available for later. So 16, boom. Okay, there we go. That's our base. Now let's build the walls. We're gonna ignore this fillet because like we said, we can just add the fillets later. But if you think about it, didn't mean to drag it. This kind of like almost a key shape just rises up out of the base. And we can see, let's align ourselves with the top. And we're going to create a new sketch. 1 useful thing is you can actually use things that already are in the part to make a new sketch. So for instance, we know that it's going to be a line with this thing here. So if we right click and hit use, it's going to basically convert that edge into a drawing. So you notice that's kind of like an arc, but we don't have to physically create it because it already kind of existed. So we can hit use for this one as well, and boom, that's going to be a little simpler than before. So going on here, we can see the wall stretches out 16. So we have lines, align ourselves to the top. We're going to use the line tool and just kind of roughly draw it out. Boom. I'm going to do that thing like I said before, where we're going to go past and then trim later. So here, 16. And we're going to keep that arbitrary because we're going to trim later. We kind of need to complete the circle. I don't know if there's a faster way to do it. All I do is I would basically just, actually it's probably easier not to have that arc. I'm going to delete that. Just make a new circle and then we just trim it away like we did before. So I'm going to hit this and I'm actually going to just do that. I know it's 65, right? So I could just dimension, or is it 65? Yeah, well, it's the radius is 37.5. It's also radius, whatever. One thing you can do is I'm going to show you some more relations. So we know that these kind of need to be aligned to each other. So we can hit relations. Coincident means they kind of line up with each other. So we know that this drawing and this edge need to line up with each other. We hit the two of them, it's going to automatically dimension it to make them line up, which is pretty cool. Then we're going to trim away the things we don't need. We don't need this, and we don't need that. And boom, that's our little key sketch that we needed. Let's extrude. We need to extrude upwards. So notice that we're extruding from the base here, which is already 16 up, and the 63 is from the bottom of the base. So we actually need to account for that. So we're going to hit extrude. If I did 63, that's going to be too much because that's 63 from the top of the base. So Onshape will do math for you if you ask it to. So we're going to do 63 minus 16 to account for this base. Just get rid of that, and then it'll like you. Oh, you can just put it in parentheses. So it'll do the math. So 63 minus 16 is a number. It's 47. It'll do the math for you. Boom. There we go. And then finally, let's add in our holes. So let's start with, I'm gonna do that trick that I showed before. So we're gonna make this hole and the big hole and then the small hole in the base at the same exact time. So we're gonna go from the top space here, make a sketch. Center point circle. Yeah, center point circle. And that's 50. Oh, that's pretty close already. That's 50. And then we're going to make the other circle here. Notice that it's actually floating. It's not on where we're going to cut. That's not a problem because if we do a through all cut, it's going to cut through nothing, which doesn't hurt. But through all is also going to keep on cutting through. So that's how we can just save some time. So we know that's going to be 22-inch diameter, or sorry, 22 millimeter diameter. Know that from this edge, it's 48 away. And finally, horizontally wise, it's 75 away from the center of this circle. So center of that circle to this one, 75. Notice everything's black, everything's fine and dandy, everything's happy. I'm going to cut our hole now. So extrude. We want to remove, not add. So notice if I cut now, it's not going to cut enough, and it's cutting through nothing. So if we just hit through all, boom, it's going to cut all the way through. Just like what we wanted. Now we're going to cut this hole in the side. Same method. We're going to select where we want to cut, which is kind of on that face there. Sketch, create a circle. I'm going to run through this because we've done it quite enough times. It is 38 from the bottom. It has a diameter of 20. And then it doesn't explicitly say kind of the horizontal, but you notice that it's lined up with the center of this hole. So this like long dash, short dash, long dash means it's the center of a circle. It's called a, what is it? It's not called a center line. Is it called a center line? I don't remember. I feel like a center line is something else. But you notice that it's aligned with also this edge here, which happens to be. You could place a circle and make it you could place like a line and physically do it, but you notice that we have this edge here that we take advantage of. So we're going to go into this, the relations, horizontal. This needs to be horizontal. Okay, it's not loving that. Let me select this point first. Horizontal with that. Okay, it didn't like that. That could be because of the way it's like situated. It might actually want vertical. So that's kind of horizontal and vertical are kind of like all relative terms. You might have to switch between them. So let me try vertical, variable. Vertical works. So even though I don't know, I guess we do want it vertically aligned. Okay, never mind. I was just being dumb. We want it vertically aligned, so we pick the vertical relation. And then we're going to cut through. The 25 will work because it's longer than the actual, I think the depth is 16. I'm gonna do through all just because, I don't know, I want to. Boom, and the last thing we need to do is you need to add the fillet on this corner. So that fillet is over here. That fillet needs to be a radius of 25. So remember what we did here for this fillet was we kind of created the actual arc itself and extruded it. Like what I was saying is like it could have just been a corner just like this and then we filleted it later, but it's gonna give you the same result. So notice this fillet and this fillet are results-wise exactly the same, but we use two different methods to create them. There we go. And then if we want to look a little prettier, what we do is we can right-click the plane, hide all planes, and get just our part here. You hide the origin, and that is our part. That's exactly what we wanted. So I hope that made sense. Hopefully, if anyone were following along, they were able to follow along. And then I want to give you guys a practice part here. If you guys want to try it yourself, feel free. If you're tired, you can also leave. But if you do want to try it out, you're welcome to try it out. And then if you have any questions or kind of want advice on like if you're stuck on making it, go ahead and ask, and we're here for you. But yeah, I want to thank you guys for your time and listening to me. And yeah, there you go. If you guys want to do it, go ahead, feel free. If you don't, that's good too. That's cool too.
We're gonna end the